I consider my journey, my experience with GLP-1 medication an absolute success. I've lost 65 pounds. I lost 50 pounds that first 6 months. If I were to lose access to this medication tomorrow, I'm not scared. Hi everyone, my name is Mima. I used to be obese. I lost all of the weight through a combination of GLP-1 medication, a whole foods diet, and weightlifting. And now I am training to be an endurance cyclist. And today we are going to be talking about my entire GLP-1 journey. GLP-1 has been probably the most important tool that I have had in my arsenal since September of last year so that I can actually get to this point of where I am today, fitness and health and everything wise in my life right now. So I am just so excited to share with you guys like the entirety, the details, all of that, because this medication has helped me so much. And I know that I have talked about my experience with GLP-1 in my introduction video and sprinkled here and there with some of the reaction videos that I've done. There was this one video where I reacted to a post on the Zepbound subreddit, Zepbound being the GLP-1 medication that I am on right now. So I am on that subreddit a lot and I do participate a lot in the discussions there. And some of my training videos have sprinkles of my experience on GLP-1 medication, but I haven't actually talked about my journey in its entirety. And I thought it was about goddamn time that I actually made a video talking about my entire GLP-1 journey. But before we dive in, I just want to put a disclaimer out there. I am not a doctor. I am far from it. I am not licensed in any way in any state in the US, in any country of the world to practice any form of medicine or health and wellness. What I'm sharing with you guys here is just my experience. I have also learned so much from the medical team that has helped me on this journey, specifically my obesity doctor, the dietitian on my team, as well as the psychiatrist on my team. So a lot of my knowledge as well comes from my engagement with them, the hours upon hours of not just our FaceTime in the clinic, but also my messages and our conversations back and forth on my chart. And because of that engagement, because of that interaction, I have done my own research as well. Like I mentioned, I have been in the weeds with a lot of the subreddits on GLP-1, Zepbound, Wegovy, etc. So a lot of the research that I've done and the learnings that I've gathered as well are also guided by my experience with my doctors. So again, not a medical professional. None of what I say is medical advice. It is just me sharing my own experience with this medication and the process of being on this medication. And I hope my experience, my journey inspires someone, anyone to actually go to their doctor and talk about their own issues with their weight, with their metabolic health, talk about the potential to be on this medication, and actually have a plan in hand, form a plan with your doctor in hand. So again, not medical advice, just sharing my own experience and hoping that someone is inspired to take charge of their own health. With that said, let's get into it. And I'm going to start by talking about why and how I got started on GLP-1 medication. So around early fall, maybe late summer of last year, I had like a slew of medical appointments with a variety of doctors, just doing like annual checkups for specific parts of my body. And that was a part of my plan, me and my husband's plan to basically get ready for expanding our family. And I wanted to take charge of my health. I wanted to make sure that I was healthy enough for pregnancy. And if there were any issues, then I would be able to take charge, resolve those health issues so I would be able to have a safe and healthy pregnancy. Of course, I went to my PCP first. That's always like your first stop, right? And then we did like a whole annual checkup thing with getting blood work done to make sure that everything was normal or within range. And then my next plan was to go to my OBGYN to do the more reproductive health stuff. When the blood work that my PCP ordered came back, we already saw some issues. One, to me, the most important and also the most scary was the fact that I was pre-diabetic already. And the second part was that my cholesterol levels were high. At that time, I was already class 1 obese. I was 185 pounds and I'm 5'3", so that is a big, like that weight is it's a big weight for me. And she was very frank, my doctor. She said that if I didn't make any changes to my diet and get my weight down before pregnancy, then I would have a pretty challenging and probably high-risk pregnancy. She knew though that I had an OBGYN appointment, so she said, go to your OBGYN appointment and tell me what she thinks. But I suspect this will be the same case. Like she will say almost the same thing. So I went to my OBGYN appointment and it was, as my PCP had said, basically almost the same thing, that one, with my numbers currently, I would probably have a high-risk pregnancy, being class 1 obese as well. I might also have fertility issues. We did not check for that at that time. I was also at risk and probably very likely have gestational diabetes, not just because of my numbers, but because my family has a history of type 2 diabetes as well as gestational diabetes for the women in my family. So it was very clear to me that I needed to make a change if I were to prioritize my health, if I wanted the safe and healthy pregnancy that I wanted, that something had to change. So I went back to my PCP with the intention of creating a plan. Now, I'm going to be very, very honest with you guys in that I was terrified, not just because of what the implications were of my numbers, of what my doctors had said, but because I had tried and failed to lose weight before. The only time that I say I was successful in losing weight was when I did a caloric deficit sometime during the height of COVID, and I could be locked in to having a caloric deficit. But when everything opened up and I started traveling for work again and things started to get really stressful again physically, I could not maintain the caloric deficit. And I regained all the weight that I lost and some extra pounds in there too, which is why I got to 185 pounds. So I was worried that I was going to fail at this, that I would not have the pregnancy that I was hoping for, that I would not become healthy, that I would not be able to lose the weight. And I came into a second appointment with my PCP to kind of like make a plan on how we were going to do this, like having that mentality. I was very anxious about all of this. I was very anxious about what my life could look like because, one, I have a job that I love, that I am incredibly passionate about, but it can also be pretty demanding in terms of like my time, in terms of like my physicality, because I travel so much for work. And this is not just like travel between states or, travel transatlantic from the East Coast to the West Coast. I'm talking about 14, 15-hour flights to other countries, and that takes a toll on your body. And can you imagine what that kind of travel did to a class 1 obese body? I was really scared going into that second meeting with my PCP. Thankfully, I had the mindfulness to be honest and told her exactly what I just told you guys about all of this. And she told me, hey, you are not alone in this, and we have so many resources for you. So she referred me to the weight manage program of the hospital system that I was already in at, where my doctor, both, my PCP and my OBGYN was in already. And my appointment was not going to be until months and months and months and months later because of the demand for this kind of healthcare, this kind of medical care. And I was really surprised, honestly, at how long I would have had to wait. And that, honestly, that made me a little sad. It made me a little depressed as well, because then I would have had to wait so long, much, much longer than what I had planned, what my husband and I had planned timeline-wise for us to actually start trying for a baby. Thankfully, I clicked on that little box in my chart that says, get me on the wait list. And for some reason, an appointment opened up like a month later from when I was referred. I could not click on that thing fast enough. I am so glad for technology in this case, because then I got my appointment much, much, much quicker than what I would have had originally. And I finally got to meet an obesity doctor, someone who really specialized in obesity medicine, and also other members of the weight management program, other specialists in the weight management program, like a registered dietitian and a psychiatrist on the program, to basically help craft my own program for my goals that I wanted. Now, at this point in my journey, I had no idea what GLP-1 medications were. I am not in pop culture. I am not in celebrity culture. I had no idea about Ozempic. I had not heard of Ozempic before. It just wasn't a consciousness in my mind at the time. So when I came into that first meeting with my obesity doctor and we talked about my entire history, not just my family history of metabolic disorders, but also my history with, trying to lose weight, my experience with going on a caloric deficit, and all of that kind of stuff. Even my current diet, nutrition. It was very exhaustive because it was an hour-long, like a legit hour-long appointment, like an intake appointment. We also talked a lot about my work and what my what my stressors were, my biggest stressors were, all of that kind of stuff. So it was very exhaustive, very holistic, not just, looking at my food and my exercise, but also looking at all the other stuff that plays a role in my life, basically. And after all of that conversation, that was when the topic of GLP-1 medications were brought up. And I basically had to have her explain to me what they did. Now, my doctor has been in obesity medicine for a very long time. So she has actually been a part of the generation of doctors, because she's not that old, that actually started to prescribe the first generation of GLP-1 medications. So she knows these medications inside and out. She has no qualms with prescribing them. She knew her stuff. She did give me a caveat that the new class of GLP-1 medications, which is what we're seeing now, like Ozempic, Wegovy, Zepbound, Mounjaro, the second gen, I think they are the second generation of GLP-1 medications, that they were very expensive. Not a lot of insurance plans cover them, and that it would be an investment on my part. Thankfully, when she put in Zepbound, that's the drug that I'm currently on right now. When she put in Zepbound in her computer, it was covered by my insurance plan. Only $20. My copay was only $20 a month for a $1,300 medication. And she was like, oh, okay, that solves that problem. And she asked me, am I open to it? Am I interested in it? Am I willing to do the work while being on this medication? And I said, absolutely yes. Tell me what to do. And her telling me what to do wasn't exactly her telling me what to do. It wasn't as if I had like a meal plan or whatever when I came out of that appointment. I had other appointments to meet with a dietitian and also talk to the psychiatrist in the practice to actually create something that would work for me, would work for my lifestyle, would work for my goals, because every person is different. Every person has different metabolic issues. So it's not a one size fits all thing. She also ordered an extra set of blood work from me just to check on a couple other things, because she suspected that I had insulin resistance after I talked about my experience with a caloric deficit and how I would feel with the meals that I was making while I was on that caloric deficit. She was like, I think, and based on your family history too, I think that you might have insulin resistance. So there was a set of extra blood work ordered for me. And then after I had done all of the appointments with the dietitian and the psychiatrist, I went back to my obesity doctor for a second time to basically talk about everything that had happened, not just from our intake appointment, but from the other appointments that I had had and my blood work. So in that second appointment, it was very clear that I needed to do a complete overhaul of my diet. At this point, my diet was made up of mostly ultra processed food. Between like my first appointment and my second appointment, my doctor said during my first appointment, don't change anything about your diet yet. Just like eat the way that you would. And I know that because we've had this appointment that people tend to like try to be a little bit more healthy, but don't do that. Let's just be completely 100% honest about what you're eating. Track it and like just list the foods that you're eating. You don't even need to track your calories or whatever. Just list the foods that you're eating from now until our second appointment. and then we'll take it from there. I'm pretty sure she already had an idea of what kinds of foods I was eating. So I did that. Like, I just tracked what I ate for a while, not even tracking calories, but just what I ate. I just did normally, and I listed it down on my notes app. I didn't even have a food tracker or whatever. And then went back to that appointment with the new results of the blood work and that tracking thing. And of course, all of the stuff that I had talked about with the psychiatrist and the dietitian. And that was why it was made very clear that my nutrition was going to be the first thing that we would have to work on while on this medication. And I completely agreed, because when I saw my list, I was like, Jesus Christ, that is a lot of ultra-processed food. It was just probably 80 to 90% ultra-processed food. It was insane, the amount of junk food that I was eating. And sort of like the how fatty, even the home-cooked meals that I was doing, and I cook a lot because it's one of my forms of love, like one of my love language forms, or one of my love languages. Yes, one of my love languages. Cooking for people that I love, and just realizing how much healthier I could make, like just tiny swaps that I could make, right, to make this food a lot better. So that was one thing that was very clear, and that was what we wanted to, or what my obesity doctor and the dietitian wanted to focus on the first 6 months of me being on GLP-1 medication. I had been warned very clearly, very emphatically by both the dietitian and my obesity doctor that the start of GLP-1 medication, or like the first month, especially the first couple of weeks, can be very tough eating wise, in a sense that while your body is starting to get used to the medication, it can be very, very hard to eat. And that can be very jarring for some people. So we had started to do a lot of work to prepare me for that, and just sort of like mental exercises about the food that I was eating and what my goal was in terms of what I wanted my nutrition and my diet to look like at the end of this, or even like at the end of the first 6 months. So after the second appointment, after we had drafted a plan together, I was prescribed the GLP-1 medication. I was prescribed Zepbound or tirzepatide, which is the weight loss equivalent of Mounjaro. I was prescribed 2.5 milligrams, which is the starting dose, and we were off to the races. So again, the first 6 months of this medication was heavily focused on nutrition. My obesity doctor didn't even care if I did not go to the gym or not, or had like any form of exercise or not. We were just heavily focused on changing my diet, making sure I had enough nutrition. So, we did a lot of work on like identifying foods that I really liked, why I like them, foods that I didn't like, why I didn't like them. Just talking about like why, like was it the texture, was it the taste, and for all of for basically like every food that you can imagine, even the junk food, and breaking down the junk food about like what I like about the junk food, what I don't like about them, what do I like about McDonald's and what I don't like about them. So there's a lot of like processing of those things, while I was also trying to eat the best that I could. Now, everyone talks about protein and prioritizing protein during, while you're taking GLP-1 medication. And that was highly recommended to me, especially on the first couple of weeks when it was very hard for me to even meet 1,000 calories because my body was getting used to the medication. So I lived a lot on protein shakes, protein bars, things that were calorically dense was something, and not like ultra processed food or whatever, because I honestly could not stomach ultra processed food the first couple of weeks I was on Zepbound. Like any of the super fatty, super sugary, I just could not stomach it. So I focused on protein heavy things, calorically dense, whole things, like a lot of nut, granolas and nut butters, all of the very calorically dense stuff. So that was what I focused on eating the first couple of weeks, basically. All the while working on the other side of that, like on the other side of the actual eating part, working on a lot of like nutrition education with my dietitian. In terms of losing weight, the medication was very, very effective. And I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. I also don't want to keep looking at my phone. So I will try my very best to put on either side sort of the graph of the line graph, the weight trend that I had from when I started taking GLP-1s, which was towards the end of September, I would think, last year. Yes, towards the end of September last year. So I started with 185. I am now currently where we are at end of October 2025. I'm at 117. I've been going from 117 to 120. I feel like that's that's been the good spot for my body at the moment. So anyway, weight loss wise, it was very effective, but my focus wasn't really on the weight loss. My focus was the nutrition, because it was the nutrition part that was going to help with my A1C numbers and my cholesterol numbers. I was adamant that I was not going to be getting gestational diabetes during pregnancy. I was adamant. Like, even now, I'm not pregnant yet. I will not be pregnant for a while, but I'm adamant to not get gestational diabetes when I'm pregnant. And even though I lose weight, if I have a shit diet, that's not going to help at all. And also the fact that I can't be on this medication while pregnant, so I need to really lock it in. I need to be able to get that nutrition, that diet part down. So I worked for 6 months. I did do and get on the scale just to make sure that there was a record of it, just to make sure that my obesity doctor was kept abreast of what my weight was and that I wasn't losing weight too quickly. But I worked incredibly hard with both my obesity doctor, my dietitian, even the psychiatrist, to really lock the nutrition part down. So that was the first 6 months of my GLP-1 journey. And again, I don't know the exact numbers, but from end of September 2024 to around March of 2025, this was the amount of weight I lost. I think that's about 50 pounds. I basically lost a majority of the weight that I lost in the first 6 months without exercise. And that was because I was working on a caloric deficit. That is the basic accounting of weight loss. And what the GLP-1 medication did to help move that along is really to keep my insulin resistance in check. Because one of the conversations that my obesity doctor and I had was that my insulin resistance was causing a lot of my food noise and was a big reason why I could not feel full during meals that were not carbohydrate heavy. So that was, that was her suspicions. She thinks that was a big part of it. And honestly, she's right. Just like based on how I'm eating now, I am still on GLP-1 too, so this has not been tested like off GLP-1 medication. I do think she's right, and I am so grateful to her for putting that into perspective for me and identifying what exactly was wrong with my body, that caloric deficits were so challenging for me to maintain. And which is why the nutrition part in the first 6 months was so important, was because I needed to know exactly how to eat for my body, exactly how to eat for my insulin resistance so that I would not succumb to my insulin resistance and mess up my diet and go back to eating ultra-processed food again. So that was why the medication was so effective for me. And the fact that I have only been on Zepbound 5 milligrams since October of 2024, and 5 milligrams is sort of like the second dose after 2.5, just goes to show how effective the drug has been for me and how far I have come to this shift from September and sort of like the panic mode of July and August of like going to my PCP and my OBGYN and sort of like having these moments of depression where I could not imagine being able to do this, to like that point in March of 2025, March of this year, where I was like, damn, I'm 50 pounds down. I have not even done super heavy exercise. And what I felt at that time was like small shifts, small efforts to change my diet. I did, like I said, do a lot of education, a lot of reading on nutrition, especially nutrition for insulin resistant folks, and realized that a lot of my favorite foods actually are not bad for insulin resistant folks. Like, I just needed to make a couple of changes, to make a couple of adjustments for it to actually complement my insulin resistance. So that's what my dietitian and I worked on for the first 6 months, what my obesity doctor monitored. And then when I hit that, lost 50 pounds, basically, I was at 135 from 185. That was when we shifted again. What prompted this next shift in my GLP-1 journey was basically this one question that I asked my doctor, which was, if I were to lose access to this medication, like insurance wouldn't cover it, I wouldn't be able to afford it, like I would not be able to have any access to any medication that would help me manage my insulin resistance. Is there something else I need to be doing other than this entire shift that we've done with my diet? And the one thing she said was, you're going to have to build muscle. So my doctor explains to me that muscle is an incredibly important metabolic organ, especially for people with insulin resistance, because muscle is the biggest glucose sink in the body. If you have muscle, they soak up the glucose, which means it doesn't have enough time to get into your bloodstream. Your body doesn't have time to send signals to your pancreas to pump out more insulin. So you don't actually go through that process of having more insulin release in your bloodstream. So muscle is incredibly important. The more muscle you have, the bigger your glucose sink is. And that also means that having more muscle means you are less prone to blood sugar spikes. So you don't feel that crash after you have a very high carb or high sugar meal, which at that point, like at this point in time, like at 6 months and even now currently, I don't eat a lot of added sugar anymore. I don't have very high carbohydrate meals at this point. So with more muscle comes with more blood sugar stability, which as an insulin resistant person is incredibly important. And for weight loss in general, more muscle means a higher basal metabolic rate because muscle needs a lot more energy to work, essentially. So having more muscle helps maintain the weight loss. And the only way for me to have muscle, to build muscle, is to strength train. And the thing is, like, we had already initially talked about exercise and strength training down the road from a GLP-1 journey. We just didn't have like an actual timeline for it. We were looking the first 6 months at how I would adapt to this new lifestyle, to this new diet, how my brain, my behavior, my feelings, my emotions would adapt in the midst of the stressors of my life. Because while I could change my diet, there were some things that I just could not have control over, which was my travel schedule, when things at work become very heavy, very demanding. So we really focused on that aspect of things in the first 6 months before introducing something that was a lot more time consuming and would take up space in my day, because let's face it, the diet was the most important part of this anyway, especially the first 6 months. So strength training became a priority that fateful day in March this year. And that's when I basically started an entire new journey in this umbrella of my GLP-1 journey of strength training and building muscle. And boy, has it been one of the best things that's happened to my life. I can't even accurately describe, vocalize, verbalize how much strength training has changed my life, and I could even say has saved my life. Because I haven't said this yet, but I was very happy about my weight loss. I was very happy about the changes to my diet and that I was able to stick to it, that we were able to do it as a family. But also at the back of my head, I had a lot of anxiety about being able to maintain this off the medication, which is why I asked that question to my obesity doctor. I didn't want to go back to being class 1 obese. I didn't want to go back to being pre-diabetic. I didn't want to go back to being high risk for gestational diabetes. I wanted to be here at this moment, healthy, with a healthy diet, being a normal BMI. And once I started strength training, actually following a routine, a program for strength training, losing more weight, and not a lot of weight, I would say, because I mentioned earlier, the first 6 months of my GLP-1 journey, which was when I lost a huge, like the biggest chunk of weight, actually a majority of the weight that I've lost 65 pounds. I lost 50 pounds that first 6 months, and I'm at 117 to 120 now. So that's what, an additional 15 pounds in just like the last 6-7 months that I've been on this medication. So that's not a lot, but this last 6 to 7 months, I've stopped giving priority to the scale, but really focusing on strength training and seeing my progress in strength training, not just sort of the aesthetics, because I am seeing some really good aesthetic gains. I love the way that my body looks now. I love the way that I look in clothes. I carry myself so much differently. I have so much more confidence in my body. I'm just going to be honest and say that out loud. But what has completely changed is just like internally, physically, how I feel in my body. Just like, I don't know how to explain it, but like the physically, like I feel so good. I feel so much more energetic. I am less anxious, less prone to negative emotions. I have so much more clarity, like brain clarity. I process things so much faster. I feel like I am even more creative as a person because my brain is just suddenly like a lot clearer about a lot of stuff. And yes, while I felt a lot better losing 50 pounds, I definitely since 2022, I have had chronic back pain. I have not had back pain. I have not had a flare up since I basically lost the weight. Like I would say since December of last year. So I don't even know how many pounds. I'll probably if I find it, I'll probably put it up here, how many pounds I lost in December of last year. But yes, the weight loss did make me feel a lot better, like physically, but the strength training, the building muscle, the being active, it just took my body to a whole new level. And I can't really explain it. And I just started feeling like my body was so much more capable than this. And I had not felt like that at any point in my entire young adult or adult life. Like I had always been confident about my brain, like the capacity of my brain. And that is why I've gotten to the point of where I am in my career. I'm very happy. I'm very proud of where I am in my career. And that is mostly due to my brain, but my body. I had not realized and I had not felt like this about how much more capable I found my body to be. So by June, late June, early July of this year, when I went to another appointment with my obesity doctor, just checking in and also getting another round of blood work. Basically, it was a year, almost a year to being on the medication. Everything looked great. I felt great. I was not at all worried about anything anymore. But unfortunately, my cholesterol was still very high. And this was when I was diagnosed with genetic high cholesterol, which is par for the course. So many members of my family have genetic high cholesterol too, so I was not entirely surprised. So we had to do a little bit of a shift again because I was worried about the cholesterol levels to some degree. Pregnancy does increase your cholesterol levels, so I was like, I didn't want these to go any higher while carrying a baby. So we made another shift around that time, end of June, early July, which was one, to shift my diet a little bit more towards a pescatarian diet, less red meat. If I were going to eat any land-based animal product, it would probably be poultry, and really a lot of fish, less dairy products, or at least consume non-fat dairy products, or switching my milk to non-fat milk because I really like the Fairlife high protein milks. So I was like, I can't go in the plant-based milk. I really just, non-fat it is. So doing that to see how my cholesterol will go. But because we were at this point that I felt my body so capable of so much more, I was like, I'm doing a lot of strength training, but I'm not doing a lot of cardio at all. I'm walking my dog every morning, 2 miles, but not a lot of cardio. So that's how I got roped into, by my own accord, my own decision, into endurance cycling. And I added cycling to my training plan basically, and have adopted what I would consider an athlete's lifestyle. Sleeping early, waking up early, having a routine, managing my stress, drinking a lot of water, watching what I eat, tracking my calories, tracking my macros, having a training plan for every day, having recovery days and planning for recovery days, basically adopting an entire new lifestyle, again, to account for the fact that I needed to take charge of my health again in this way. So that's where we are today. from September 2024 of being 185 pounds and not at all active and eating 80 to 90% ultra processed food to now October of 2025, end of October 2025, 65 pounds down. I mean, you could even say 68 pounds down because I'm 117 currently, but again, I fluctuate between 117 to 120, so it doesn't really matter at this point. A complete revamp of my diet, 80-20 whole foods, mostly getting my protein from fish and white meat, poultry, white meat. Incredibly, incredibly active. I have a physical activity every single day, 3 times a week. I do strength training 3 times a week. I ride my bike outside. And then on my recovery days, I usually do Pilates for flexibility, joint mobility, balance. It's not really for weight loss. It's not really for strength training or endurance. It's really just for, it's my active recovery activity. Now I have better routines, better stress levels, better stress management habits, better habits in general. And GLP-1 medication was the tool that unlocked that door for me. Would I have gotten to this point without GLP-1 medication? Honestly, I don't know. I don't want to speculate on that because I don't know what my journey would have looked like. I probably would still have had the same medical team that I have now, only that we would have done things differently if GLP-1 medications didn't exist, or if I wasn't qualified or could not get access to GLP-1 medication. Am I thankful that I have access to GLP-1 medication and that it's incredibly affordable for me? Absolutely, 100% fucking yes. It has been a godsend of a medication because what it has done for me, it saved me so much time and grief, because it did a lot of the heavy lifting for me in terms of not worrying about my food too much, like thinking about what I'm eating next, like what's in front of me, but it gave me the space, the mental space to actually focus on nutrition education rather than like what's on my plate right now. I don't know if I explained that very well, if that made sense to you guys, but it just opened up a much bigger space for me to learn, to form habits. It made me less embarrassed and shameful talking to my doctors and my medical team about how I was feeling, what I was eating. It did a lot of the heavy lift for me mentally. So I could focus on the important parts of building structure, building processes and systems and habits for me to make that foundation for this body, this future or present at this point that I have now as an athlete, basically. And I know some people will probably complain, oh, you're not an athlete, you're not competing, blah, blah, blah. I live like an athlete. I eat like an athlete. I manage my health. I track what I eat. I track my exercises like an athlete. I consider myself an athlete because that is the identity that I want to ascribe to. That helps me with the discipline that I have now to keep my habits, my routines, make sure my systems are well oiled and geared up so that I look like this and I feel like this and I move like this in the world. And now, if I were to lose access to this medication tomorrow for some strange or maybe plausible reason, I mean, we are living in a crazy time right now, I'm not scared. I know exactly what I need to do. I've built the systems, the habits, the routines, the infrastructure internally inside me and outside me to be able to maintain this lifestyle, to be able to maintain the management of my insulin resistance without medication. I know exactly what to eat. I know exactly what to do. I know how to build muscle. I know how to keep muscle. I know how to keep my heart health up. I just have a lot more confidence in myself to be able to maintain this lifestyle, maintain and improve this lifestyle. Okay, outfit change. It is now the next day. I had to stop my recording yesterday because things got a little crazy in the house and I never got back to recording. So we're back. I don't know where I stopped yesterday, and I just don't have the time today to actually look through what I think was almost an hour of me just talking about my GLP-1 journey yesterday. So with all of that said, I consider my journey, my experience with GLP-1 medication an absolute success. I am still on it. Like I mentioned, I have been on 5 milligrams since my second month. We are in October and this is my 13th month of being on GLP-1. So I have not really titrated up to the higher doses. And honestly, it doesn't feel like I'm taking GLP-1 medication anymore, in a sense that I don't have this big suppression of my appetite. I have serious macros and caloric maximums, limits, and minimums that I have to meet if I want to build muscle and if I want to be able to nourish myself properly for the training that I do as an endurance cyclist. So that's important to me. A lot of people face challenges with training like this while on GLP-1 because of the appetite suppression, but because I am on such a low dose, I can basically eat as much as I want at this point. But the food noise still remains almost non-existent, and that definitely helps with me keeping my 80-20 whole foods diet and watching added sugar, making sure I have enough fiber. Now, I know a lot of people call these medications a miracle, a wonder drug, and yes, I absolutely agree with that. But I don't think I would have gotten this much success on the medication. By success, I'm not just talking about losing 65 pounds. I'm talking about this entire lifestyle change that I have basically undergone in the last 13, 14 months while on this medication. So again, the whole foods diet, the strength training, the endurance cycling training, and the added routines, processes and systems and habits and discipline that I've built to be able to manage the whole foods diet, the strength training, and the endurance cycling training. So that's the entire package of what I see as a very successful GLP-1 journey. And I don't think this would have been possible for me if I had only taken the medication and not had the medical team that I have had with me from the very beginning. So my obesity doctor, the dietitian, the psychiatrist, and as well as my PCP, my OBGYN, and now my cardiologist, because they are now part of my entire health management structure. So it was because we all worked together, because I listened to them, they listened to me, and we all pretty much work symbiotically in terms of managing my medication, managing my symptoms, and just generally knowing how I feel, how I'm keeping on, how I'm, mentally doing as well with all of the changes that had been happening with me while on this medication. So basically the entire program that I'm in, it's the entire program that has made me incredibly successful on this medication. So that is my successful journey on GLP-1 medication. I hope you guys learned from this. I am always happy to answer any questions that you guys might have. Feel free to sound off in the comments if you do have any of those questions. I am also on Instagram, so you're welcome to send me a DM over there. Thank you so much for spending your precious time with me and listening to my story, my journey. I'll see you in my next video. Till then, happy riding.